So a few words about today's sermon. First, I am going to lie to you twice, just so you know. I'm also going to tell you how you may win an argument because I know that some of y'all love a good argument. I'm going to talk about sex because that's fun in church, right? I'm also going to mention a talking donkey because talking donkeys are fun, but in a different way. And I'm going to talk about the Bible, about why you should or shouldn't read the Bible. And I'm going to talk about the love and the grace and the justice and the patience and the faithfulness that I see in your beautiful lives. Even when we are anxious or angry or afraid, when we are overflowing with doubts, you are beautiful, faithful, loving people. You matter. You are included. Your story is part of God's story. And I just wanted to let you know where we're headed this sermon with this sermon in case you drift off to sleep or lose your Zoom connection or your mind wanders. Let's start by talking about the Bible. As you may know, Kaylee and I are preaching a series of sermons that for several weeks run parallel to our confirmation class. And one of the things that the confirmation class talks about is the Bible. So let's start with this very obvious sentence. The Bible is just a downright complicated book. Parts of it may seem completely incomprehensible to us, right? Parts of it are bizarre. There's a story of a person with a talking donkey. I told you I was going to mention it. There's a story about another person who lives inside a whale for a few days. There's a story about a person turning into a statue of salt. I mean, really, it is a bizarre book. But that's the first lie. The Bible is not a bizarre book. It is a bizarre collection of books. The Bible is not one book. It's 66 different books, except that that's a lie too. We Protestants say that the Bible is 66 books, but other people count differently. Many of our Jewish friends say that the Bible has 24 books. Some of our Jewish friends say the Bible has 35 books. Some Catholics say that there are 73 books in the Bible. So the Bible is such a complicated collection of books that we can't even agree on how many books are in the Bible. Some people like to argue about that. Here's my take on the number of books in the Bible. It just doesn't matter. It just absolutely doesn't matter to me. The Bible is a collection of books. It was written by dozens of different people at different times in different languages. Now, some details. Basically, the Bible, as we understand it, comes to us in two parts. The Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, and the New Testament, the Christian scriptures. The Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures break down more or less into three parts. The Torah, which are the stories and laws that start the Bible. The Netuvim, which is the prophets, Micah, Isaiah, those folks. The Ketuvim, which are the writings like the Psalms, Proverbs, some poetry, some music. The second part of the book, the Christian scriptures, the New Testament, also breaks down more or less into three parts. There are the Gospels, which are the stories about the life and ministry of Jesus. There is the book of Acts, which is the story of the early church. And then there are a series of letters toward the end of how we put our Bibles together. So back in the old days, way back in the old days, like in 1980, for instance, back in the old days of, say, 1980, confirmation students had to memorize the books of the Bible, to know the names of the books of the Bible in order. Maybe some of you who were old, and I put that in quotes, had to do that. We don't really do that much with confirmation students anymore because you can Google the books of the Bible way faster than you can memorize them. Confirmation these days has changed from when some of us went through those kind of processes. It's more about spiritual formation, more a focus on the so what. When we think about the Bible for confirmation students, we might say something like, we have the Bible, we have this collection of books, so what? Why do we care about the Bible? So here's what I want to say about that. You don't have to. You absolutely do not have to care about the Bible. There have been plenty of people of faith who couldn't read the Bible, who didn't read the Bible, who didn't have access to the Bible. You do not have to know anything about the Bible. But I will say this, the Bible is awesome. The Bible is fantastic. I'm sure it's complicated, this series of books, because it is full of stories about people wrestling with deep questions of faith and doubt and hope and loss and love. It is full of stories of soul and spirit. It's full of flesh and blood people trying to make sense of life that is more than flesh and blood. They're trying to make sense of the wonder and mystery and life itself, trying to make sense of wonder and mystery and life itself. So again, let me back up a little bit. As I said, the Bible is this complicated collection of 66 or so books written in different languages. Some people want to know all about the dates and times and names and writers and settings and all that kind of thing. Some people want to understand everything about the Bible, Genesis to Revelation. We have in this congregation some really serious Bible students, some people who take the Bible very seriously and dig into it deeply. And I am so grateful for those people. We have some classes that are coming up in the next couple of weeks, some online gatherings to talk about various parts of the Bible, to delve into the details of it for those of you who really have that interest. For some of us in the congregation, that just doesn't float our boat. That's just too much. It's too complicated. So I would say this: you don't have to know everything about the Bible. I think that one of the reasons some people sort of keep the Bible at arm's length is because they know how complicated it is, and they think they're supposed to understand everything about it, and it's just too much. It's kind of like understanding everything in an encyclopedia. If you remember encyclopedias, it's just too much. And so people say, I don't want to have anything to do with it. That's okay. You don't have to know everything about the entire Bible. As I said, there are some diligent Bible scholars in our congregation. These classes are unfolding. Take part if you want. But I think this sermon today is for the rest of us, those of us who may not be quite sure what to do with the Bible. So if you want to explore your soul, your spirit, if you're interested in strengthening your foundation of faith, if you're interested in understanding yourself as a spirit person, as a Christian, here is a suggestion. Not the be-all, end-all of suggestions, but here is a suggestion for you. Find one thing in the Bible that speaks to you and hold on to it. Find one thing in the Bible, one sentence, one word, one story, one book, one person. Find one thing in the Bible that speaks to you and hold on to it. Don't worry about the entire Bible. Find one thing and let that seep down into you. Each week we begin our time of worship together, whether in person or online, with the phrase, God is spirit, truth, and love. That's a mashup of two verses from the Bible, but maybe that's the phrase for you. God is spirit, truth, and love. Maybe you want to just hold that and see how that feels in your soul. If you are sad, and there's lots to be sad about in the world today, if you are sad, if your tears keep you awake at night, maybe read the story of Elijah going into a cave to hide from God and to hide from the world. Elijah was sad. Let Elijah's emotions sit side by side with your emotions and be sad together if that's the need of your soul. If you're afraid, and the world is kind of scary sometimes, if you're afraid, maybe read the story about Miriam and her tambourine, making up a song about probably the most terrifying thing that ever happened, certainly to her or to any people. Let Miriam's song sing in your mind if you are afraid, and see if you can find courage or companionship through Miriam and her tambourine. Again, you don't have to worry about the entire Bible. Just find one idea, one story, and let it sit inside you. If you feel kind of sexy, maybe you feel kind of romantic, read the Song of Songs. People, it is one of the most erotic poems ever written, and certainly the most erotic thing in the Bible. It's right there, the Song of Songs. If that's your thing, read the Song of Songs. If you're having a hard time loving your enemies these days, crack open the Sermon on the Mount or the 13th chapter of Corinthians and let the words of Jesus or the words of Paul sort of wash over your spirit, words about love. See what happens. One of the things about the Bible is that there are people who love to argue about the Bible. As I said, there's kind of the internecine people, the serious Bible students who want to argue over whether a certain book was written on this date or that date. That's one type of academic arguing. But these larger sort of social arguments about the Bible, these larger cultural arguments about the Bible, and to kind of oversimplify, I think those arguments come from two camps. One is the literalist camp, the fundamentalist literalist camp. They want you and me to take everything in the Bible as fact. They want to say that you must believe the Bible, you must believe every word of it. So that's one set of arguments in our culture these days. The other comes from what I would call the anti-Bible camp, maybe the more skeptical camp. Those are the people who say, how can you take the Bible seriously at all? There's bad science, there's bad geology, there's bad biology, there's bad history. How can you take it seriously at all? So those are kind of the two camps of arguments about people, from people about the Bible. People love to argue about the Bible. That's a thing we have. We argue about whether it should be read in public schools. We argue about why anyone would believe it, all of that. People love to argue about the Bible. So here's my advice to you. When someone wants to argue with you about the Bible, just don't argue with them. Just absolutely don't do it. I told you in my introductory words I was going to offer some advice on how to win an argument. The very best way to win an argument is just don't argue. Just absolutely don't argue. So if you have one of those, let's say a fundamentalist Christian cousin, a literalist who's always posting things on Facebook, or they know that you're one of those liberal UCCers, that fundamentalist cousin may ask you, do you believe the Bible? And if they ask you that, or if they post that on social media, just say to them, hey, I've been reading the Song of Songs lately. Did you know that the Bible says your feet are beautiful, queen? Your rounded thighs are like jewels. Your navel is a rounded bowl that's always full of wine. Your breasts are like two fawns. Your eyes are like a pool of water. Say to your fundamentalist cousin, that's pretty sexy, and that's in the Bible. And it kind of makes my heart go pitter-pat. And then ask your fundamentalist cousin, does that part of the Bible get your motor going? I guarantee you, you will have a fascinating conversation that is not an argument over literalism. There's the other side of the argument, the scientific poo-pooer people who want to tell you that the Bible is full of bad science and few facts. And so we know those people. Maybe they're also our family members or coworkers or neighbors or whatever. If they ask you, how can someone as smart as you believe the Bible? Just say to them, I've been reading the Psalms. And there's a sentence in there that says, let the earth be glad, let the sea resound, let the fields be jubilant, let all the trees of the forest sing for joy. And then say to your skeptic friend, I wonder what it's like for the earth to be glad. I wonder what it's like for the trees to sing with joy. You don't have to argue about the Bible. You don't even have to read the Bible, certainly not all of it. Just find one idea, one phrase, and let that settle into your soul. Confirmation classes, again, back in the old days, used to have to memorize the names of the books of the Bible, as I said, and they also had to memorize certain verses from the Bible. I'm not going to tell you to memorize anything. I have too many passwords, too many door codes, too many phone numbers to memorize. My brain is on overload with that. But maybe you want to just lift up something simple that you really don't even have to memorize. It's so simple. God is love. God is love. Just repeat that. God is love. I'm not saying you have to believe that. I'm not saying you have to understand that. I'm not saying you have to fully know what that means. I'm just saying that maybe you want to invite that phrase into your body and see how it feels. Don't grow weary of doing good. That's another phrase from the Bible. Don't grow weary of doing good. What if you just mull that over in the world, in your mind? Ever so often, say that to yourself. Don't grow weary of doing good. I'm going to try that on. Maybe read the story of Ruth and Naomi and their love for each other, or David and Jonathan and their love for each other, and just let those stories be part of your life. Maybe find your own life alive in those stories. A quick little story about the Bible and how it can infuse our living in the world. In 2005, the United Church of Christ voted at our General Synod in favor of equal marriage rights for all people, equal marriage rights, particularly for same-sex couples. In 2005, we were living in Austin at the time. I was the pastor of a church. And when that vote passed at our General Synod affirming equal marriage rights, for reasons that I don't know about, one of Pat Robertson's news crews happened to be in Austin. Pat Robertson, the conservative televangelist, evangelical sort of guy, and one of his news teams was in Austin doing some other story. And for whatever reason, they tracked me down because I was a United Church of Christ minister, and they wanted to interview me about the UCC vote at the General Synod on equal marriage. And I said, of course, and I put on a jacket and tie, and I met them at the church. They asked me how we came to that and what I thought about that vote. And so I explained some ideas about respect for all people and equality for all people, and the autonomy of persons created by God to find love in unique ways. And that news reporter asked me how I got so liberal. That was the question. How did you get so liberal? And so I said, well, when I was a little kid, my grandmother taught my Sunday school class, and she taught me two verses. God is love, and love one another. And I guess I just haven't progressed very far beyond that as a reader of the Bible, but I believe that God is love and love one another. And this news anchor then tried to pry a little deeper, and he was like, okay, let's talk about the Bible. What about Leviticus, where it says that you shouldn't do this with another person, or you shouldn't do that with another person? And so I looked at the camera and I smiled and I said, those verses are there, and there are different ways to interpret them. But for me, I really remember those verses that I learned as a kid in Sunday school. God is love, and love one another. And then this reporter went a little further and was like, well, okay, let's move to the New Testament and talk about Romans, where Paul talks about the fires of fornication and all this. And I said, again, those ideas are there, and we have to figure out what they mean for us in our day and age. But I just go back to what I learned in Sunday school, that God is love and love one another. So here's what I have to say about the Bible. Yes, it is a complicated series of books. And yes, people are complicated. And sure, there are people who want to argue about what stories from the Bible mean or don't mean. Fair enough. The Bible is full of confusing, complicated things. It's full of doubts and pains and fears. And the truth is that my life, and probably your life also, is confusing, full of confusing things and doubts and pains and fears. And the Bible has some goofy, bizarre moments in it. And my life, and probably your life, has some goofy, bizarre moments in it. And the Bible has these stories of love, grace, and justice, and patience, and faith. And I see those things in my life, and I see them reflected in your life. I see that you are people of love and grace and justice and patience and faith. So why read the Bible? Because you are included in it. People like you, people like me, people trying to understand our souls and our spirits as we make our way through the world. There's some sentences in our confirmation curriculum where the writer says to our students, words that are worth us reading. Confirmation curriculum says, the Bible is full of people, smart ones, evil ones, courageous ones, honest ones, beautiful ones. And they're just like the people you know or can imagine. That's what makes the Bible so timeless, so real. It's telling stories about normal people dealing with the same issues we deal with today. Love, greed, fear, doubt, leadership. The Bible is very old, our confirmation curriculum says, but the stories it tells are as true for us now as they were for the people of ancient Israel and the early church. There are no stories, feelings, attitudes, struggles, or victories that are outside of God's story. Your story is God's story. Your story, friend, is God's story. Thanks be to God. Amen.